Sometimes the people we judge in 5 seconds are the same people the world stands up to honor the next day. Rebecca Collins had built her career on confidence. At 34 years old, she was one of the most recognizable television personalities in the state, the kind of woman who could walk into a convention center and instantly attract attention. Her smile appeared on billboards, her voice filled morning broadcasts, and her social media followers numbered in the hundreds of thousands. People listened when Rebecca spoke. People agreed when Rebecca formed an opinion. And that was exactly why what happened 2 days ago would soon become the most humiliating moment of her life. On a quiet Wednesday evening, Rebecca sat alone in her upscale downtown apartment, a half-finished cup of coffee resting on the glass table in front of her. The city lights glowed beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting reflections across the room. She had just returned home after a long day of preparation for what many considered the biggest event of the year. The National Education Leadership Summit would bring together influential figures from across the country, including business leaders, philanthropists, educators, and public officials. Rebecca had been selected as one of the event hosts, a career opportunity she proudly described as a major milestone. Her phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages. Everything seemed perfect. Then the television interrupted a commercial break with a special announcement. The words "breaking news" appeared across the screen. Rebecca barely paid attention at first. She reached for her coffee and glanced casually toward the television. Then she froze. The cup slipped from her fingers. Coffee splashed across the floor. Her heartbeat seemed to stop. On the screen was a face she recognized immediately. A tall black man with calm eyes and a composed expression stood behind a podium while reporters crowded around him. Rebecca's mouth slowly fell open. Her face lost all color. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be him." The camera zoomed closer. There was no mistake. It was him. The same man she had looked down on. The same man she had publicly embarrassed. The same man she believed had no place among successful people. Now every major network in America was broadcasting his image. Reporters were calling him one of the most influential figures in the country. Rebecca stared in disbelief as the television host spoke excitedly about a historic achievement that would soon be celebrated nationwide. Her breathing became shallow. Suddenly, memories rushed back into her mind. The crowded convention center, the expensive suits, the important guests. The moment she first noticed a man wearing an old jacket and carrying a worn backpack. The moment she decided he didn't belong. The moment she opened her mouth and changed both of their lives. Rebecca slowly stepped closer to the television, unable to look away. The man on the screen remained calm, confident, respected by everyone around him. The entire nation seemed eager to hear what he had to say. But all Rebecca could think about was what she had said to him 2 days earlier. And as the news anchor prepared to reveal the reason this man had suddenly become the center of national attention, Rebecca felt a wave of dread unlike anything she had ever experienced. Because if the world was about to discover who Marcus Johnson truly was, then she already knew one thing for certain. She had made a terrible mistake. 2 days earlier, the convention center buzzed with energy long before the first guests arrived. Located in the heart of downtown Chicago, the massive glass building stretched across nearly 3 city blocks and was already filling with executives, educators, investors, and media personalities from across the country. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Television crews adjusted cameras. Event staff rushed through final preparations. Everyone knew this summit attracted powerful people. Everyone wanted to be seen. Rebecca Collins stepped out of a black SUV wearing a tailored navy suit and carrying herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to attention. The moment she entered the lobby, several attendees greeted her by name. She smiled, shook hands, and accepted compliments about her recent television appearances. Every interaction reinforced what she already believed. She belonged here. This was her world. As she made her way toward the main ballroom, she passed groups of guests discussing business deals, education initiatives, and upcoming partnerships. The air carried the sound of polished conversations and expensive confidence. Then something unusual caught her attention. Near the registration area stood a tall black man wearing faded jeans, worn brown shoes, and an old jacket that looked years out of place among the designer clothing surrounding him. A weathered backpack rested over one shoulder. He stood quietly studying a schedule booklet while hundreds of people moved around him. Unlike everyone else, He seemed completely unconcerned with appearances. Rebecca slowed her pace. Her eyes narrowed slightly. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Nearby attendees noticed him too. Some glanced briefly before looking away. Others exchanged curious expressions. The man, however, remained calm and focused. He approached the registration desk with a polite smile. A young volunteer greeted him. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to the summit." The man thanked her and provided his name. The volunteer typed something into her computer. Her expression changed almost immediately. She looked surprised. Then she looked at him again. Before she could say anything further, another staff member called her away to assist with a separate issue. The brief moment passed unnoticed by everyone except the volunteer herself. The man simply picked up his visitor packet and continued walking toward the ballroom. Rebecca watched him disappear into the crowd. Something about the situation irritated her. She could not explain why. Perhaps it was the fact that he looked so comfortable in a place where she felt he did not belong. Perhaps it was because everyone else seemed willing to ignore it. Whatever the reason, the image stayed in her mind throughout the morning. Hours later, as the summit officially began, Rebecca took her position backstage. Event organizers reviewed schedules, while speakers prepared their presentations. Everything appeared to be running smoothly. Then one of the production assistants approached Rebecca with a clipboard. "We have a small issue," he said. "Someone is sitting in the reserved VIP section and security is trying to verify credentials." Rebecca barely looked up. "Who is it?" she asked. The assistant pointed toward the front rows of the ballroom. Rebecca followed his gesture. Sitting calmly among seats reserved for distinguished guests was the same man she had noticed earlier. The old jacket rested beside him. His backpack sat at his feet. And despite the growing attention around him, he looked completely unbothered. Rebecca stared for several seconds. Then a slow smile appeared on her face. In her mind, she already knew exactly what was happening. And before the day was over, she intended to do something about it. Rebecca adjusted the microphone clip to her jacket and looked toward the front of the ballroom again. The man was still there. While other attendees checked their phones, exchanged business cards, or spoke with sponsors, he sat quietly reviewing the event program, as if he had every right to be in one of the most exclusive sections of the summit. Rebecca shook her head. The confidence annoyed her more with every passing minute. Around her, members of the production team prepared for the opening session. A camera operator followed her gaze. "Who are you looking at?" he asked. Rebecca pointed subtly toward the front row. The man looked up briefly, then returned his attention to the booklet in his hands. The camera operator frowned. "Maybe he is somebody important." Rebecca laughed. "Important people do not show up carrying a backpack that looks older than my career." The operator shrugged. "You never know." Rebecca dismissed the comment immediately. In her experience, appearances told a story. Successful people presented themselves a certain way. They understood expectations. They understood image. And the man sitting in that VIP seat clearly did not fit the picture she had built in her mind. Minutes later, one of the event coordinators approached the section with two security staff members. Rebecca noticed them speaking quietly with several guests before eventually stopping beside the man. She watched carefully. The coordinator smiled politely and appeared to ask a question. The man responded calmly. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and showed something. Whatever it was seemed to surprise the coordinator. The security staff exchanged confused looks. For a moment, Rebecca expected them to escort him away. Instead, the coordinator nodded respectfully and walked off. The man remained exactly where he was. Rebecca stared in disbelief. "What was that?" she muttered. Curiosity quickly turned into irritation. She left the backstage area and crossed the ballroom floor. Several attendees recognized her and greeted her along the way, but she barely acknowledged them. Her attention remained fixed on the front row. By the time she arrived, the man was placing his booklet back into his backpack. Rebecca stopped beside him. "Excuse me," she said. The man looked up. His expression was calm and polite. "Yes." Rebecca smiled, but there was little warmth behind it. "Are you sure you are sitting in the correct section?" The man glanced around. "I believe so." "You believe so?" Rebecca repeated. "This area is reserved for special guests." "I understand. Then maybe you should double-check your credentials." Several nearby attendees began listening. The man remained composed. "Thank you for your concern," he said. "Everything is in order." Rebecca folded her arms. Something about his calm response felt almost insulting. Most people would have become nervous. Most people would have apologized. Instead, he seemed completely unfazed. One businessman sitting nearby leaned toward another and whispered something that caused both men to chuckle. Rebecca noticed and felt encouraged. Others clearly saw the same problem she did. Interesting, she said. Because from where I am standing, it looks like someone made a mistake. The man looked at her for a long moment before offering a small smile. Sometimes things are not always what they seem. Rebecca laughed softly. Trust me. In this case, I think they are. The man did not argue. He simply nodded and returned his attention to the stage. Somehow that quiet confidence bothered Rebecca more than any response could have. And without realizing it, she had just taken the first step toward a mistake she would soon wish she could erase forever. The opening session began 30 minutes later. Bright lights illuminated the stage while hundreds of attendees filled the ballroom. Rebecca stepped behind the podium and welcomed everyone to the summit. Her voice carried confidently through the room. Years of television experience made public speaking feel effortless. The audience responded warmly. Cameras rolled. Event sponsors smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Then Rebecca looked toward the front row again. Marcus Johnson sat in the same seat, listening quietly while keynote speakers were introduced. Somehow his presence continued to bother her. She could not understand why security had allowed him to remain there. Every time she glanced in his direction, she became more convinced that someone had made an embarrassing mistake. During a short break between presentations, attendees mingled around the ballroom. Rebecca stepped away from the stage and joined several sponsors near the VIP section. One executive noticed where she was looking. You keep watching that guy, he said. Rebecca laughed. Can you blame me? The executive glanced toward Marcus. He does stand out. Another woman joined the conversation. Maybe he won some kind of contest. A few people chuckled. Rebecca smiled. If that is the case, somebody forgot to tell him this is a professional event. The group laughed more openly. Their reactions encouraged her. She felt validated. Clearly, she was not the only person questioning why Marcus was there. As the conversation continued, Marcus stood and walked toward a refreshment table. Rebecca watched him cross the room. The old jacket, the worn shoes, the faded backpack. To her, everything reinforced the same conclusion. He did not belong among the executives, philanthropists, and influential guests attending the summit. An idea suddenly entered her mind. It was the kind of remark she often made on television when she wanted a quick laugh from an audience. Normally, she knew exactly where the line was. But today she felt unusually confident. Maybe he is conducting a social experiment, she joked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Or maybe he took a wrong turn looking for a bus station. Several people laughed. One man nearly spilled his drink. A few others turned toward Marcus. Rebecca noticed and continued. I am serious. Somebody should probably check whether he wandered into the wrong building. More laughter followed. Marcus heard it this time. He slowly turned around and looked toward the group. The room did not become silent, but the atmosphere shifted. People sensed the attention moving in one direction. Rebecca met his gaze. For a brief moment, she expected embarrassment. She expected him to leave. She expected him to defend himself. Instead, Marcus simply looked at her calmly. There was no anger in his expression. No frustration. No attempt to argue. He merely offered a polite nod before continuing toward the refreshment table. That reaction confused her. Most people would have been upset. Most people would have said something. Yet Marcus acted as though none of it mattered. The lack of reaction somehow made Rebecca feel even more determined to prove she was right. Across the ballroom, a young college student named Emily Parker had witnessed the entire exchange. She had received a scholarship to attend the summit and had been sitting only a few rows away. Unlike everyone else, Emily looked deeply uncomfortable. She glanced at Marcus, then back at Rebecca. There was something she recognized immediately that nobody else seemed to understand. As Marcus walked away, Emily's eyes widened slightly. She whispered to herself, "There is no way. It cannot be him." But if she was right about who Marcus Johnson really was, then everyone in that ballroom was about to learn a lesson they would never forget. Emily spent the next several minutes wrestling with what she should do. She sat near the back of the ballroom, barely paying attention to the presentations taking place on stage. Her eyes kept returning to Marcus. Every time she looked at him, her certainty grew stronger. She had seen his face before, not once or twice, but many times. Yet nobody around her seemed to recognize him. The strange part was that Marcus appeared completely unconcerned by the attention he was attracting. While other guests networked aggressively and searched for opportunities to impress influential people, he listened carefully to every speaker, occasionally taking notes in a small notebook. During the lunch break, attendees gathered around buffet stations and conversation tables. Rebecca continued entertaining groups of sponsors and guests. The story about the man with the backpack had become a source of amusement for several people. Each retelling grew more exaggerated. Maybe next year they will let people camp in the lobby, one guest joked. Laughter followed. Rebecca smiled. At least then we would know where he belongs. More people laughed. A few looked toward Marcus. Some shook their heads. Others smirked. The atmosphere was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Marcus remained alone near a table by the windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. He ate quietly and occasionally smiled at staff members who passed by. A catering employee accidentally dropped a tray of bottled water nearby. Before anyone else reacted, Marcus immediately stood and helped gather the bottles rolling across the floor. The employee thanked him repeatedly. Marcus simply smiled and returned to his table. Emily noticed everything. So did several other attendees. Yet somehow nobody connected his behavior with the assumptions being made about him. Rebecca saw the interaction as well. Instead of reconsidering her opinion, it strengthened it. See, she told one sponsor. He looks more comfortable helping the staff than talking with the guests. The sponsor chuckled. You really do not like him. Rebecca shrugged. I just do not understand why people pretend not to see what is obvious. Across the room, Marcus glanced briefly toward the group. For a moment their eyes met again. Rebecca expected irritation. Instead, Marcus offered the same calm expression he had maintained all day. That composure began frustrating her even more. Why was he not embarrassed? Why was he not leaving? Why did he seem completely unaffected while others laughed at him? Later that afternoon, the summit moved into a networking session attended by several hundred guests. Name badges displayed company, affiliations, and organizational titles. As people exchanged introductions, Rebecca noticed something unusual. Marcus wore his badge turned backward. The printed information was hidden from view. Now that is interesting, Rebecca said. What kind of professional hides their credentials? A nearby executive laughed. Maybe there are none. Several people smiled. Rebecca felt vindicated once again. Yet a few feet away, Emily looked genuinely worried. She had finally pulled out her phone and searched a name she remembered from years earlier. When the results appeared on her screen, her stomach tightened. The photograph she found matched the man sitting alone near the window almost perfectly. Emily looked up at Marcus, then back down at the phone, then up again. There was no mistake. She knew exactly who he was. The problem was that nobody would believe her. And if she was right, Rebecca Collins was only hours away from making the biggest mistake of her entire career. The final session of the day attracted the largest audience yet. Every seat in the ballroom was filled. Additional attendees stood along the walls. Industry leaders prepared for panel discussions, while media teams moved cameras into position. Rebecca stood backstage reviewing her notes, but her attention kept drifting toward Marcus. By now, what had started as mild irritation had grown into something else. She wanted validation. She wanted someone in authority to finally acknowledge that he did not belong in the VIP section. As she prepared to walk on stage, she spotted one of the summit directors speaking with sponsors near the entrance. Rebecca approached him immediately. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. She nodded toward Marcus. Who exactly approved that guest? The director followed her gaze. Which guest? The man with the backpack. The director looked briefly confused. I'm not sure. Rebecca lowered her voice. People have been talking about him all day. The director shrugged. If he is here, he has credentials. That answer only frustrated her more. Before she could continue, the director was called away by another organizer. Rebecca watched him leave, feeling increasingly annoyed. Across the room, Marcus remained exactly as he had been all day. Calm, patient, completely unaffected. The contrast bothered her. It seemed unfair that someone she viewed as an outsider could sit there with such confidence while she felt distracted by his presence. Meanwhile, Emily could no longer keep her concerns to herself. She approached Marcus during a short break. Excuse me, sir, she said quietly. Marcus looked up and smiled warmly. Hello. Emily hesitated. I think I know who you are. Marcus studied her face for a moment. Then he smiled slightly. Do you? Emily nodded. I saw your picture years ago. Marcus remained silent. Why are you not telling anyone? Emily asked. Marcus glanced around the ballroom. Conversations filled the room. People continued networking. Nobody paid attention to them. Because that is not why I came here, he answered gently. Emily looked stunned. But after everything people have said, Marcus interrupted her with a calm smile. People are free to make assumptions. Character is revealed by how we treat others, not by how they treat us. Emily did not know what to say. The response only confirmed what she already suspected. Marcus glanced toward the stage where preparations for the final session were underway. Do not worry about me, he said. Enjoy the conference. Emily nodded slowly and walked away, more amazed than ever. Unfortunately, someone nearby had noticed part of the interaction. Rebecca saw Emily speaking with Marcus. From a distance, it appeared serious. Her curiosity immediately returned. After Emily left, Rebecca approached the student. What was that about? Emily looked uncomfortable. Nothing. Nothing. Rebecca pressed. You were talking to him for several minutes. Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell the truth. Another part knew nobody would believe her. I just asked him a question, she replied. Rebecca laughed softly. Well, if he tells you he owns the building, do not believe it. Emily's expression changed immediately. You should not judge people so quickly. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Trust me, I know exactly what I am seeing. Emily looked toward Marcus one last time. Then, she quietly replied, that is what worries me. Before Rebecca could ask what she meant, an announcement echoed through the ballroom, calling everyone back to their seats. And as the audience settled in for the final presentation, Emily found herself wondering how many people would regret their assumptions once the truth finally came out. The final presentation began as the ballroom lights dimmed slightly and a massive screen illuminated behind the stage. Rebecca stepped into her hosting position and welcomed everyone back with her usual confidence. The audience responded with applause. Cameras moved smoothly across the room. Everything appeared normal on the surface, but beneath that polished atmosphere, tension continued building in ways most people did not yet understand. Marcus remained seated in the front row. Emily sat several rows behind him, unable to focus on the presentation itself. Every minute that passed increased her anxiety. She knew a secret that could change the entire mood of the room, yet she had promised herself she would respect Marcus's wishes. If he wanted privacy, he deserved it. Still, watching people laugh at him all day felt increasingly painful. Midway through the session, attendees were invited to participate in a live networking exercise. Guests were encouraged to introduce themselves to people they had not met before and discuss their professional goals. Groups quickly formed throughout the ballroom. Rebecca noticed Marcus standing alone near the edge of the room. An opportunity presented itself. With several cameras still recording promotional footage for the summit, she walked toward him accompanied by a few sponsors and guests. Well, she said loudly enough for people nearby to hear. This seems like the perfect chance for everyone to learn more about each other. Several attendees turned their attention toward the conversation. Marcus looked at her calmly. I agree, he replied. Rebecca smiled. Then perhaps you can tell us what organization you represent. A few people exchanged curious looks. Marcus answered politely. I work with educational initiatives. Rebecca nodded slowly. Educational initiatives? She repeated. That sounds very broad. Some people chuckled. Marcus simply smiled. Education affects many different areas. Rebecca pressed further. And what exactly is your title? The crowd listened closely. Marcus paused for a moment before answering. Titles are not usually the most important part of the work. More laughter followed. Rebecca glanced around as if proving a point. That is certainly one way to avoid answering the question. Several guests smiled. One sponsor shook his head. Another quietly laughed into his coffee cup. Yet Marcus remained completely composed. His confidence never wavered. His voice never changed. His expression remained warm and respectful. The contrast between his calmness and the growing amusement around him became impossible to ignore. Then something unexpected happened. A senior event coordinator hurried across the ballroom, carrying a folder. He stopped abruptly when he noticed Marcus. For a split second, genuine surprise appeared on the coordinator's face. Sir, he said respectfully, I have been trying to locate you all afternoon. The nearby laughter faded. Marcus turned toward him. Is everything all right? The coordinator nodded quickly. Yes, sir. We received a message regarding tomorrow's national broadcast, and they requested confirmation. Several people nearby exchanged confused looks. Rebecca felt a small knot form in her stomach. The coordinator seemed unusually deferential, almost nervous. Marcus accepted the folder and thanked him politely. The coordinator nodded again before walking away. Silence lingered for several seconds after he left. Rebecca forced a smile. "Well," she said, attempting to dismiss the moment, "you certainly seem popular." Marcus looked at her calmly. "Not really." Then he added something that would stay in Rebecca's mind long after the summit ended. "Sometimes people spend so much time deciding who matters that they forget to learn who someone really is." And for the first time all day, Rebecca found herself wondering whether she might have misjudged him after all. By the time the summit ended that evening, the atmosphere around Marcus had changed slightly. Not enough to erase the day's events, but enough to plant uncertainty in a few minds. Guests slowly filtered out of the convention center carrying briefcases, conference materials, and business cards. Rebecca remained behind for a final production meeting regarding a major national television broadcast scheduled for the following morning. The opportunity was enormous. Millions of viewers would be watching. Industry leaders from across the country would tune in. Rebecca had spent weeks preparing for it. As she reviewed her notes with producers, Marcus quietly left the building through a side exit. Emily happened to see him go. Acting on instinct, she hurried after him. Outside, the evening air was cool and the city lights reflected across the glass towers surrounding the convention center. Marcus was walking toward a modest rental sedan parked near the curb. "Mr. Johnson," Emily called. Marcus stopped and turned. "Hello again." Emily approached carefully. "I need to ask you something." Marcus smiled. "Go ahead." Emily hesitated. "Why did you let all of that happen today?" Marcus seemed unsurprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "The comments. The assumptions. The way people treated you." Marcus glanced toward the convention center. Through the glass walls, attendees could still be seen networking and laughing. "Because people reveal themselves when they think there is nothing to lose," he answered. Emily frowned. "But it was not fair." Marcus nodded. "Fairness is important. So is patience." Emily looked down briefly before asking the question that had been on her mind all day. "Do you know who Rebecca Collins is?" Marcus chuckled softly. "Most people do." "Then you know what she said." "Yes." Emily stared at him. "And you are not angry?" Marcus looked toward the city skyline. Anger rarely teaches the lesson people need to learn. Before Emily could respond, Marcus's phone rang. He answered immediately. His voice remained calm. "Good evening." A pause followed. Then his expression changed slightly. Not surprise. Not excitement. More like quiet acknowledgement. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for letting me know." Another pause. "Tomorrow morning?" "Yes, that will be fine." Emily could not hear the other side of the conversation, but she noticed something important. Whoever was calling treated Marcus with extraordinary respect. After ending the call, Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Everything okay?" Emily asked. Marcus smiled. "Tomorrow will be an interesting day." Emily opened her mouth to ask another question, but Marcus simply wished her a good evening and got into his car. As he drove away, she stood on the sidewalk feeling more certain than ever that something enormous was about to happen. Back inside the convention center, Rebecca finished her meeting and prepared to leave. One of the producers approached her with a schedule for the national broadcast. "Big day tomorrow," he said. Rebecca smiled. "The biggest of my career." The producer nodded. "Wait until you see who the featured guest is." Rebecca laughed. "Whoever it is, I am ready." The producer grinned. "Trust me, the entire country is going to be talking about him." Rebecca smiled confidently and slipped the schedule into her bag without reading it. If she had looked at the guest list right then, she would have discovered the truth nearly 12 hours earlier. Instead, she walked out of the building completely unaware that the man she had spent all day mocking was about to become the most important person she would ever interview. Rebecca arrived at the television studio before sunrise. The building was already buzzing with activity. Producers moved between control rooms carrying schedules and coffee cups. Makeup artists prepared dressing rooms. Camera crews tested equipment. The atmosphere felt electric because everyone knew this broadcast would reach millions of viewers across the country. Rebecca thrived in environments like this. She had spent years working toward opportunities exactly like this one. As she entered the studio, several colleagues congratulated her. "Big day," one producer said. The biggest, Rebecca replied confidently. She settled into the makeup chair and reviewed her notes for the morning program. Segment times, sponsor mentions, discussion topics. Everything looked familiar. Everything felt under control. Then her executive producer entered the room, carrying a tablet. "You are going to love this," he said. Rebecca smiled. "What now?" He handed her the tablet. The network just released the final promotional package for today's featured guest. Rebecca glanced at the screen casually. The promotional video had already accumulated thousands of comments overnight. Curious, she pressed play. Dramatic music filled the room. Images flashed across the screen. Classrooms, college campuses, scholarship recipients, families celebrating graduations, students receiving diplomas. Then a narrator began speaking. For more than 15 years, one man has quietly transformed the future of education in America. Rebecca watched with growing interest. Through innovation, leadership, and an unwavering commitment to opportunity, his foundation has helped tens of thousands of students pursue dreams that once seemed impossible. More images appeared. New schools, community programs, scholarship ceremonies. Then the narrator continued. Today, he will be honored for one of the largest educational initiatives in modern American history. Rebecca sat up slightly. Whoever this person was, he clearly mattered. The video continued. His work has impacted communities in all 50 states. His vision has inspired educators, business leaders, and public officials across the nation. Then the screen faded to black. A single name appeared. Marcus Johnson. Rebecca felt her stomach drop. For a moment she could not breathe. The room suddenly felt smaller, louder, warmer. Her eyes locked onto the screen. Marcus Johnson. The name repeated in her mind. No, that was impossible. She grabbed the tablet and replayed the final seconds. Again the image appeared. Marcus standing confidently before a crowd. Marcus speaking at a graduation ceremony. Marcus shaking hands with governors, university presidents, and national leaders. Marcus, the same Marcus, the man from the summit, the man she had mocked, the man she had treated like an outsider. The producer smiled, completely unaware of her reaction. Incredible story, right? Rebecca stared at the screen. Who is he? She asked quietly. The producer laughed. Who is he? Rebecca, where have you been? He is practically a legend in education circles. He pulled up another article. Then another. Awards, national recognition, major partnerships, interviews with prominent leaders. Rebecca felt the color drain from her face. Every article revealed something bigger than the last. Every headline made her feel worse. Then she saw a photograph that nearly stopped her heart. It showed Marcus standing beside the President of the United States during a National Education Initiative announcement. Rebecca slowly lowered the tablet. The room felt silent even though people were still moving around her. Her mind replayed every joke, every comment, every laugh, every assumption. And then the producer said the words that made everything even worse. By the way, you will be interviewing him live in less than 2 hours. For the next 90 minutes, Rebecca moved through the studio like someone trapped inside a bad dream. Makeup artists touched up her appearance. Producers reviewed segment notes. Camera operators finalized positions. Yet she barely heard any of it. Her mind remained fixed on one fact. Marcus Johnson was not just important. He was one of the most respected figures in the country. And in less than 2 hours, she would be sitting across from him on live television. Several times she considered finding him before the broadcast began. Several times she thought about apologizing immediately. But every attempt ended the same way. What could she possibly say? Sorry for assuming you did not belong. Sorry for encouraging people to laugh at you. Sorry for treating you like you were invisible. None of it sounded adequate. Meanwhile, across another part of the building, Marcus arrived at the studio carrying the same worn backpack and wearing the same simple jacket. The security staff greeted him warmly. Executives from the network personally welcomed him. A senior producer escorted him to a private guest lounge normally reserved for high-profile visitors. Yet despite the attention, Marcus remained exactly as he had been at the summit. Calm, polite, unimpressed by status. Back in the control room, excitement continued building. One producer monitored social media engagement. The numbers are unbelievable, he announced. People are tuning in from all over the country. Another producer nodded. Everyone wants to hear what Marcus has to say. Rebecca sat silently reviewing her interview questions. For the first time in years, She felt nervous before going on air. Not because of the audience, not because of the ratings, because of the guest. 20 minutes before the broadcast, she finally gathered enough courage to leave her dressing room. She walked down a hallway toward the guest lounge. Her heart pounded with every step. When she reached the door, she stopped. Through a small glass window, she could see Marcus sitting comfortably in an armchair reading notes. A network executive stood nearby speaking with him. Both men appeared relaxed. Rebecca almost knocked. Almost. Then she saw Marcus smile and thank the executive. The same calm smile. The same smile he had worn while people laughed at him. Suddenly embarrassment overwhelmed her. She turned around and walked away before anyone noticed she was there. Minutes later, the countdown to live broadcast began. Studio lights brightened. Theme music played. Camera feeds appeared on monitors throughout the building. Rebecca took her seat at the interview desk. Across from her sat an empty chair reserved for Marcus. The control room counted down. 30 seconds. 20. 10. 5. The broadcast began. Rebecca welcomed viewers across America with the professionalism that had built her career. The opening segments moved smoothly. Headlines were discussed. Guest commentators appeared. Audience engagement climbed higher and higher. Then the moment arrived. The executive producer's voice came through her earpiece. "Stand by. Marcus Johnson is walking to the stage." Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. Studio doors opened. Everyone backstage seemed to pause. Staff members turned their heads. Cameras adjusted positions. And then Marcus entered the studio. He walked confidently toward the interview desk as applause erupted from crew members and invited guests. Rebecca forced herself to smile. But inside, she felt something entirely different. Because for the first time since learning the truth, she realized there was no way to avoid what came next. In just a few seconds, she would have to look directly into the eyes of the man she had humiliated and pretend the previous day had never happened. Marcus settled into the chair across from Rebecca as the broadcast continued live across the country. The applause gradually faded, but the energy inside the studio remained intense. Rebecca forced herself to maintain her professional smile. Years of experience helped her hide nervousness from viewers, yet inside, she felt completely unsettled. Marcus, on the other hand, appeared perfectly at ease. The same worn jacket rested neatly across the back of his chair. The same calm expression remained on his face. Nothing about him suggested a man seeking attention. Rebecca began with the prepared introduction. Our guest today has become one of the most influential voices in education reform. His work has helped students across America pursue opportunities that once seemed impossible. Please welcome Marcus Johnson. The audience applauded again. Marcus nodded politely. "Thank you for having me." Rebecca glanced at her notes. "Millions of people know your name today, but many may not know your story. Tell us where this journey began." Marcus smiled. "It began in a neighborhood where very few people expected success. I grew up watching talented students lose opportunities because of circumstances beyond their control. Eventually, I realized that education could change everything." As the interview continued, viewers learned more about his work. He described scholarship programs, mentorship initiatives, partnerships with universities, and community investments. The audience listened carefully. Even crew members behind the cameras appeared captivated. Then the producers rolled a special video package. Images filled the giant studio screens. Students receiving scholarships. Families celebrating graduations. New educational centers opening across the country. The narrator's voice echoed through the studio. Over the last 15 years, the Johnson Foundation has funded educational opportunities for more than 100,000 students. Its programs operate in all 50 states and have become a model studied around the world. Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. She had known Marcus was important. She had not realized the scale of his impact. The video continued. His foundation recently announced the largest privately funded scholarship expansion in American history, creating opportunities for future generations of students regardless of background. Gasps could be heard among some audience members. Rebecca stared at the screen. But the biggest surprise had not arrived yet. The narrator continued. In recognition of these achievements, Marcus Johnson was selected as this year's National Citizen of the Year and appointed to a Presidential Advisory Council on Education. The studio erupted into applause. Several audience members stood. Others followed. Within seconds, Nearly everyone was on their feet. Rebecca sat frozen. She remembered every joke she had made at the summit, every dismissive comment, every assumption. The standing ovation continued for nearly a full minute. Marcus accepted the recognition with humility, thanking students, teachers, volunteers, and community leaders rather than focusing on himself. When the applause finally settled, Rebecca looked across the desk at him. For the first time since the interview began, Marcus met her eyes directly. There was no anger in his expression, no smug satisfaction, no desire for revenge. Somehow that made the situation even harder for her. Because the man she had treated as insignificant had just been revealed as one of the most respected figures in America. And deep down, Rebecca knew the hardest part of this conversation had not happened yet. The interview continued, but the atmosphere inside the studio had changed completely. Everyone now understood that Marcus Johnson was far more influential than they had imagined. Viewers across the country flooded social media with praise. Messages poured into the network's live feed. Producers watched engagement numbers climb higher every minute. Rebecca tried to focus on the next question, but her composure was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. She knew what the audience did not. She knew what had happened at the summit. She knew how she had treated the man sitting across from her. Then an unexpected message appeared on a producer's monitor. One of the camera operators at the summit had uploaded behind-the-scenes footage from the event. Clips were beginning to circulate online. Several members of the production team exchanged worried looks. The executive producer quickly reviewed the footage. His expression changed immediately. Rebecca noticed. "What is happening?" she asked quietly during a commercial transition. Nobody answered. The producers simply looked at her with concern. When the broadcast returned, Marcus was asked about leadership and character. The timing could not have been worse for Rebecca. "In your opinion," she asked carefully, "what is the most important quality a leader can have?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Humility," he answered. "The ability to see value in people before you know their title, their income, or their accomplishments." The audience applauded. Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. Meanwhile, the summit footage continued spreading online. Viewers watched clips of Marcus sitting quietly in the VIP section. They watched him helping staff members. They watched him being treated dismissively by several attendees. Some clips included Rebecca's comments. The reaction was immediate. Thousands of viewers expressed disappointment. Many pointed out the irony. A woman whose career depended on communication had failed to understand the person sitting right in front of her. Back in the studio, the executive producer made a difficult decision. During the final segment, he instructed Rebecca through her earpiece to address the situation honestly. There was no point pretending it had not happened. The footage was already everywhere. Rebecca sat silently for several seconds. Then she took a slow breath. Millions of people were watching. Marcus remained calm. The audience waited. Finally, Rebecca turned toward him. "Marcus," she said softly, abandoning the prepared script. "There is something I need to say." The studio became completely quiet. "Yesterday, at the summit, I judged you based on your appearance. I made assumptions that were unfair. I failed to show the respect that every person deserves. And I am deeply sorry." The silence that followed felt enormous. Rebecca lowered her eyes briefly. For perhaps the first time in her public career, she appeared completely vulnerable. Viewers watched closely. Audience members waited for Marcus's response. He could have embarrassed her. He could have reminded everyone what she had said. He could have taken advantage of the moment. Instead, Marcus smiled gently. "Thank you for saying that." Rebecca looked surprised. Marcus continued. "The truth is, many people make assumptions. The important thing is whether we are willing to learn from them." The audience applauded again, louder than before. Some people even stood. Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes. Not because she had been humiliated, but because she had been shown grace when she least deserved it. And at that moment, everyone in the studio realized that Marcus Johnson's greatest achievement was not his success, his influence, or even the lives he had changed through education. It was the simple fact that he treated others with dignity even after they had failed to do the same for him. The broadcast ended with a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Audience members lined up to shake Marcus's hand. Producers thanked him for appearing. Network executives praised the interview as one of the most impactful segments they had ever aired. Yet through all the attention, Marcus remained exactly the same person he had been when he walked into the summit wearing an old jacket and carrying a worn backpack. He treated every staff member with respect. He thanked the camera operators. He thanked the assistants. He even thanked the interns who helped organize the event. As people slowly left the studio, Rebecca remained seated for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. Less than 48 hours earlier, she had been completely certain she understood Marcus. She had looked at his clothes and decided his value. She had seen a backpack and assumed a story. She had judged a man before learning a single meaningful fact about his life. Now she understood how wrong she had been. Over the following days, the interview became one of the most discussed broadcasts of the year. Clips of Marcus's words spread across social media. Educational organizations praised his message. News outlets highlighted his achievements. But surprisingly, many viewers focused on something else. They focused on the grace he showed when faced with disrespect. Commentators pointed out that true character reveals itself not when life is easy, but when people have the power to embarrass someone and choose kindness instead. Marcus never spoke negatively about Rebecca in public. He never criticized her. He never used the situation to elevate himself. Instead, whenever reporters asked about the incident, he gave the same answer. We all have opportunities to learn. What matters is whether we take them. Those words resonated across the country. Several weeks later, Rebecca attended another educational event. This time, her perspective was different. She found herself paying attention to people she might previously have overlooked. She spoke with students, volunteers, custodians, and support staff. She listened more carefully. She judged less quickly. The experience had changed her in ways she never expected. During that event, she unexpectedly crossed paths with Marcus once again. He greeted her with the same calm smile. "Good to see you, Rebecca." She smiled back. "Good to see you too." For a moment, they simply stood there, surrounded by students and educators whose lives had been improved by his work. Then Rebecca said something she wished she had understood from the beginning. "I spent years interviewing successful people, but I think you taught me the most important lesson of all." Marcus smiled. "And what lesson was that?" Rebecca looked around the room. "That a person's worth is never determined by what they wear, what they drive, or how much money people think they have." Marcus nodded. "That is a lesson worth remembering." As he walked away to greet a group of scholarship recipients, Rebecca watched the students gather around him. They were smiling, laughing, and thanking the man who had helped create opportunities for their futures. In that moment, she finally understood what made Marcus Johnson extraordinary. It was not the awards. It was not the national recognition. It was not the influence or the success. It was the simple truth that he saw value in people long before the world recognized their potential. And from that day forward, Rebecca never forgot the mistake she made, nor the lesson that followed it. Because appearances can create assumptions, but character reveals the truth. And the truth is that every person deserves dignity before they earn admiration. The people who understand that lesson change lives. The people who forget it eventually learn it the hard way.